Hello, que mi gente. Welcome to the Monoplaza F1 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Emi Bertre, and this week we are going to be getting into the Dutch Grand Prix. All right, let's get it started. First and foremost, apologies to Lando Norris. Uh, on my behalf, I had been no. I'm not gonna apologize, but I will say congratulations to Lando. Yes, I am a bit of a Lando Norris hater, but real recognize real, and shocker when you have the fastest car on the grid, you are most likely to win as long as you have the skill set. So, congratulations to Lando Norris. Congratulations to McLaren. And yeah, wow. Lando dunked on Verstappen in P2 by 22.896. Let's just call it 23 seconds. He dunked on him by 23 in a crazy turn of events. Who would have thought that McLaren would be where they are now after what we saw last year in Bahrain, where Lando was literally lapped twice by the field? So yeah, what a turn of events. Now, a lot of people are going to say that this race was not super exciting. Um, Not a lot of stuff happened. You saw some overtakes. They didn't show a lot of them on the F1 TV coverage or the Sky Sports coverage, ESPN coverage, which I think they all overlap anyways. So I didn't see a ton of overtakes, right? And so again, a lot of people were thinking, nah, this race was a little bit bleh, a little bit bland. And a lot of people is me. All right. I'm a lot of people. so um yeah, so let's start, I guess, with qualifying and what that was like on Saturday. Now, on Saturday, I got the opportunity to do something that I've never done before, and that was be a part of Saturday qualifying show. A lot of fun. So again, shouts out to Tasha. Shouts out to Quick Stop F1 family. Always going to give a shout out to them. But what I did not mention during that episode was that I came in I came in a little bit depressed. No, not depressed. It was just kind of like I came in. I had high expectations for that qualifying. I mentioned it on that show that essentially I thought, hey, Mercedes ended on a high note. It looks like now we have another team to join the fray. So you have Red Bull, you have Red Bull, whatever order you want to put that in, and then you have Mercedes joining the party, right? And then uh, they didn't lay a big egg, but the car was basically back to where it was before. So we had a shocking Q2 exit by Lewis Hamilton, which propped him or dropped him down to P12. And of course, that wasn't like the only surprise of qualifying. So like it is what it is. Frankly, like fine. Like Lewis obviously has to get his qualifying sorted. This is something that we've known now for a while. But yeah, Lewis, my brother in Christ, my favorite driver on the grid. I know you know this. I know everybody knows this. Um, yeah, let's sort out that qualifying because, as you rightfully pointed out, had you qualified higher, so let's say you had qualified P4 like George did, you most certainly would have also finished the race at least in fourth place, right? And as is customary, so first let me get this out of the way, right? Like, Sky Sports in particular likes to bring out the qualifying head to head, and George obviously is trouncing Lewis in it. And I've always said, and a lot of people have always said, so not original to me, points are scored on Sunday, not Saturday, right? And up until now, the racing head to head was um, pretty much even. I think George had the edge. Of course, Lewis has two legitimate victories in the year, George has one victory, and barring the disqualification, I'm going to say he has one legitimate victory. And if we're giving out brownie points and participation trophies, George also crossed the finish line first at Belgium, albeit in an illegal car. But that's neither here nor there. So, in any case, what is true though is that, as has been seen throughout almost every race in the entire year, George usually qualifies ahead of Lewis. Great, we've got that. And somehow ends up either finishing in and around the same spot as Lewis or behind Lewis. So, yeah, I'm not going to go into a deep dive of why that is. That's just kind of facts, right? So, for me, the shocking Q2 exit in qualifying was Lewis, so he starts P12, right? And not only that, he then inherited a penalty for a ghost impediment or impeding on Checo Perez, which then saw him go to uh, P15. Right, so already off to a bad start. That wasn't the only shocking exit, obviously, of qualifying. Carlos Sainz also exited in Q2, and he finished ahead of Lewis in P11, started the race P10 after Alex Albon got disqualified from qualifying, which is a fun phrase to say, disqualified from qualifying. Anyways, and so, yeah, I will be forthcoming in saying that I was shocked by the exit of at least Lewis Hamilton. That car is completely unpredictable. Again, shouts out to George for qualifying in fourth. I thought that they were going to qualify a lot higher, had my hopes up for that. The weather in Zandvoort was more or less, I was expecting rain. The rain didn't come until after qualifying. It is what it is. But what I will call out is we talked a lot about, and I mentioned this on Saturday as well, we talked a lot about how qualifying was just kind of like ho hum. And what I will say to that is we have become spoiled this season. In that last season, we all would have been hyped for life, cheering. That's amazing. Wow. When Max got out qualified and did not get pole, right? But such is the racing this season and the quality that we are getting this season, that although Lando Norris qualified and he got pole, right? And I was hating. All right. So I'll get that out of the way. I was hating and I said, okay, by at what point is Lando going to lose out to Max Verstappen, who qualified in P2? And by the way, yes, he did. Obviously, the end result is what mattered. Still, Lando needs to sort out his starts, but apparently at this point, it doesn't matter considering how fast the car is, right? But crazy as the season is, no one was, unless you're a McLaren fan or a huge Lando Norris fan, no one was like terribly excited. And it's pretty obvious right now that Max Verstappen and Red Bull don't have the fastest car anymore, whether that's because technical loopholes were closed and asymmetrical braking is no longer legal, and whether or not that was directed at Red Bull, I'm not here to prognosticate or say if and or whatever, right? But something was fishy. Anyways, but to my point, honestly, it is interesting that now we are getting a lot of great racing, but we are still, I'm not gonna say complaining. I'm not gonna say complaining. We're still just kind of like, yeah, qualifying, whatever. The race, it's whatever. So, highlights of the race for me. Obviously, I'm gonna say, although Lando had an abysmal start, he managed the race well. McLaren finally got their strategy, not finally, but got their strategy a little bit more solid for this race. So there was no second guessing, no mistakes. Although there was a point in the beginning of the race where Lando's engineer was like, "Hey, who are we racing right now?" And Lando had to respond. I thought it was kind of like a dumb question. Like, what do you mean, who are we racing? We're trying to catch up to Max. Huh? What? Be serious. Anyways, and so I will have to say that the highlight of that race, one of the highlights, was at least seeing that Lando could put it together. And the reason I call that out as a highlight is that because is this reason. If Lando continues to win, right, and we have a genuine title fight on our hands, and Red Bull, specifically Max, is not able to continue getting at least second place, right? It could go down to the wire in the last race, right? What will be interesting to see is if he has it in him, if it goes down to that, or if Red Bull can figure something out, or if Lando has the metal, the fortitude, whatever it is, to continue winning. And the reason, again, it's a highlight for me is because it's going to highlight early decisions by McLaren for the strategy, right? And early mistakes by Lando, right? The Silverstone strategy, right? What happened there with the tires, right? And then Hungary, Orlando waited too long to give the position back. And as many have called out, myself included, if he were to have given Oscar that position back in Hungary early on, then probably 5 laps later, he would have been able to pass Oscar on track, blah, 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 this, that, and the third. He waited too long. The childish point he was trying to prove, whatever. And it may cost him in the end, right? It wasn't going to be team orders. But frankly, if he had followed team orders in the beginning, blah, 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 circle, right? And so it'll be interesting because if it comes down to a title fight, or if Lando loses out and he loses by like 7 points, then yes, they will be questioning Hungary. And then if, right? But what a crazy, crazy turnaround by McLaren, who seems to be the only team on the grid besides Red Bull. And not even, I think that they've surpassed Red Bull, who has understood, hey, this is what we need to do. We understand the correlation between XYZ. We have the engine, we have the aerodynamics. Boom, bop, 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 done, right? Now, I had been bullish and continue to, and I will be in the future, be bullish on Oscar Piastri, but Oscar was in the fight of his life the entire race against Charles Leclerc, who, by his own account, was extremely surprised that McLaren, or sorry, that Ferrari was where it was, right? And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But essentially, Oscar Piastri on the other side of the McLaren garage wasn't able to lock out the front row, which again, that speaks volume to Max and the skill that he has. Obviously, it's his home circuit, so he knows how to put a lap together. Great, awesome. Piastri, I thought could have done it. And again, I'm big on Piastri. All right, I'm a big Oscar Piastri fan, so that's my own bias working there. It is what it is. But I won't say that I was disappointed in Oscar, but I was disappointed in either he didn't manage his tires well, or Charles Leclerc was putting on a defensive masterclass, which made it hard for Oscar to pass Charles. Now, besides managing his tires, I think another area where Oscar probably needs to improve is his point of attack. Not often. It's not necessarily a weakness for Oscar, because he has made some crazy and great overtakes throughout the season. But in a track that was not super easy to pass, but not impossible to pass, Oscar in a faster car was not able to get the job done. And maybe that was a direct result of him cooking his tires. But we will see. As Oscar would say post-race, McLaren is at a point now. And by the way, they're bringing more upgrades, right? So the beatdown is not going to stop. But McLaren is at a point in the season right now where they fear no track. There is no track that presents a weakness for the car, and especially with all of the upgrades that they have coming down the pipeline. So we'll see. And so, again, congratulations to Lando Norris. That is his second win. That is his second win ever in his career. Congratulations, and makes him only the third driver besides Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen to win multiple races this season. But the legitimate race is, or for the title, is between Lando and Max. I don't know if it's on. If Lando manages to win in Monza this weekend, then yes, I will say we have a legit title fight. In the meantime, we'll see. I will continue to be a skeptic. All right. I'm sorry. Like, I will continue to be a skeptic because of what I've seen so far this season from McLaren. Because we all know that just having the fastest car is not always a recipe for success, right? On the flip side, in P2 was Max Verstappen. That car is obviously not as dominant as the RB19. The the RB20 is probably what the W12 was to the W11, right? A really fast car, still competitive in comparison to everybody else, but probably not the greatest car when you compare it to what happened or what was last year in the W19, right? Water break. All right, sorry. Hey, my bad. Pause for water break. In post, I might insert some music while I do this because it's real awkward if I drink. You know what? Let me just drink water. Anyways, yeah, this episode was sponsored by H2O. That's water. Anyways, and so it is obvious now that the RB20 is not the dominant car that it used to be at the beginning of the season. Everybody's brought upgrades and it's all worked out. Now, what was good was that Sergio Perez was able to do absolutely nothing because, mentioned, as I mentioned in the qualifying show, Max needs Paris to be there to help the rear guard and to help protect, right? But that is or hasn't been happening throughout the season. This time, Checo qualified, went all the way to Q3, finally in a car that has the ability to do that. So, congratulations to that. But Max continues to drag that car through sheer skill alone to a podium position. Still one of the more dominant cars, and at times it can be the fastest car, but I feel like the most dominant car, I know I've said it so many times already in this episode, the most dominant car is McLaren with the Max Verstappen Red Bull RB20 in second. And so I have to give credit where credit is due. This would have been, or this was Max Verstappen's 200th Grand Prix. And he joins Kimi Raikkonen in other drivers in being one of the few drivers to not win his 200th uh, race, right? So previous race winners, obviously Nico Rosberg, Seb Vettel, Lewis Hamilton, right? So Michael Schumacher, great company of people, right? And so Max early on said, hey, this car is not reacting the way I want it to. It's not turning when I want it to. The tires aren't grippy, all of that. And so I think at that point, Red Bull's whole race was just predicated on let us get to the finish line and maximize our points. We know a podium is on, so let's go ahead and get that P2. Now, the other side of the garage obviously was Checo, and Checo started the race in sixth place. Did he start in sixth place? Yeah, Checo started the race in sixth. Hold on, everybody. Let me look real quick. I'll tell you. Yeah, I lied. Checo started the race in fifth place and ended the race in sixth place. So P5 start, P6 finish, and he was passed by both of the Ferraris. So Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. So again, I'm not even going to say it's a great recovery drive, but hey, he was able to secure points for Red Bull, and they need him right now. I think that the Constructors' Championship is basically going to be McLaren because they have two drivers and two very fast cars. Both drivers are competent. Both drivers are doing what they should. Checo has abandoned Max for several races now, and Max has been the one who's been bringing the points home with P1s, P2s, P1s, P2s, P5s, whatever it is, right? So I guess congratulations to Checo for doing what he's supposed to be doing in the Red Bull. Yay, everybody clap. Ah. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I'm in a weird mood. Anyways, and so the story for me again really was Ferrari and how they performed. Now moving on for Red Bull, right? We'll see what happens between them and McLaren as the year progresses. But right now, I'm just kind of speed running through this, right? Uh, Ferrari was a team that I think that they were not expecting the result that they had. So Ferrari was giving me Mercedes 2023 vibes, and what I mean by that is very mediocre qualifying and terrible one lap pace, but surprisingly good race pace and unexpected podiums to follow, right? Charles Leclerc should have won driver of the day for me. All right. For me, Charles Leclerc had the best. I'm not even going to say recovery drive. Again, he started in sixth place and he was able to make up three positions, right? He was able to pass the Mercedes of George Russell, and he was able to overtake Oscar Piastri on track. And as I mentioned earlier, Piastri was not able to um, come back and pass Charles for that final podium spot, right? And I will say that Charles had a master race, was able to fend off Oscar again in a faster car, didn't make any mistakes. The strategy was probably not, I'm not going to say it's terrible, but I will say there were some spicy moments on the radio between Charles and the team. He was pissed off about something. I don't know what it was, right? But basically, Charles was like, "Hey, stop talking about me." And I don't know if it was because the team, they forgot to turn off the radio, and Charles could hear everything that they were saying about him. But in any case, he just kind of snapped on the radio, so it was a little bit like it was a bit of an Akko Taco radio situation. But for me, he was the driver of the day, and the second driver of the day was Carlos Sainz. Carlos started P10 and ended up finishing the race in P5. So he made up 5 spots. Now, I I will be the first to say that I hate the term recovery drive. Recovery drive in this case wasn't really applied to Charles because I think he was able to overtake cars that, on paper at least, and based on qualifying, were faster than the Ferrari this weekend, right? Carlos Sainz is probably somebody that we would use the term recovery drive. But the reason I don't like the terminology recovery drive, I get what they're saying. Like they started in a position that was unexpected or lower than the car's true pace, right? And then they made their way back up to the beginning of uh, where the car realistically should be. So in Carlos Sainz's case, he started in P10, right? But in front of him was Pierre Gasly in an Alpine that we all know is not super fast. Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso in an Aston Martin that is unpredictable and frankly not faster than the Ferrari is going to be. So already those three, he should pass those three, right? Barring anything crazy like damage or anything like that, he should pass those three. Checo, I don't rate him. I thought that maybe he would have struggled against Checo, but he did not pass Checo. Um, and then obviously was able to pass George, or George was pitted, and so he gained that position as well. So more than saying the phrase recovery drive, again, for me, yes, you should pass those cars. You are faster than those cars. You just had a freak qualifying. And so the cars in front of you are slower than you. They truly are slower than you. There was just an anomaly in qualifying and some dumb mistakes on your end or traffic or whatever it was that put you in a position that was lower than the car's true pace. So I don't like the phrase recovery drive. I like damage limitation better, right? But again, almost synonymous. But it's like he's doing what he's supposed to be doing in a car that is supposed to be faster than the ones ahead of him, right? So, for instance, like for me, I would give credit if Carlos Sainz had started at P19 and ended up in P5, only because it still takes time for him to do that, right? I give credit to, if you go back to 2021, Lewis Hamilton did the same thing, right? Recovery drive, whatever. Still hate the phrase, but when you're talking about cars that are slower than you on paper and you just had a free qualifying, you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing. So I'm sorry, I just went on a little rant about recovery drives. I think that phrase is so whack. Anyways, so for me, the driver of the day, that's what started this whole tangent. It really was between Carlos and it really was between Charles. And Charles honestly should have won driver of the day. Obviously, Lando won his umpteenth driver of the day for the season. At this point, and I felt like this for a long time, it feels like it's a popularity contest. I'm not sure what Lando did to merit driver of the day except for bring it home in a car that was really fast and win by 23 seconds. So did he win driver of the day for dominating Max Verstappen and winning? I don't know. If you're watching, leave a comment and tell me why you think Lando Norris won. And I'm only trying to be a slight hater. All right. I'm just trying to be just a slight hater. I feel like the voting is wonky and it doesn't always make sense. I'm going to get off this driver of the day thing. Anyways, Charles Leclerc had an amazing drive, and I was super impressed with him, not only again fending off Piastri, but passing George, passing Piastri, and getting that unexpected podium. He did not even expect that he was going to get a podium. And you kind of feel for him in what would eventually become the wackest cool down room of the season. So it usurped the cool down room in Belgium, which I thought was also a really whack cool down room because we were robbed of a Piastri Leclerc Hamilton cool down room. The cool down room in Zandvoort was extremely wackosaurus Rex, and I felt so terrible for Charles. If you go back and look at the cool down room and see Charles Leclerc's face when he asked Max Verstappen how much did Lando win by, and when Max was like 22, 23 seconds, Charles was basically like, oh my lands. So now it's McLaren. So now it's McLaren. We're going backwards. McLaren's is going forward. Red Bull's going backwards as well. So I kind of feel for him. I kind of feel for everybody. And I don't know if this win by McLaren is ushering in a new era of dominance until the regulation changes again, right? But anyways, I did feel for Charles Leclerc. Now, moving on to the next team, I think that out of the final four that I'm going to be talking about is Mercedes. Now, Mercedes, I do not know what happened to the car. I don't think Mercedes understands what happened to the car. I can only ascertain that the reason George Russell, which by the way continued qualifying well, so he at least understands how to qualify in this car super well. Credit where credit is due. Yeah, insert whatever analogy you want to do that. But the criticism of George Russell is that he qualifies super high, but he does not manage his tires really well, and he always ends up losing positions. That's not always true, but by and large, he always ends up losing positions and ends up finishing lower than what he qualifies, right? So Canada, famously, Chinese Grand Prix, Japan, I think Miami, all these different places where I don't know. I'm just pulling races out. I don't remember George Russell's finishes for all the races. But the point being is that by and large, what we've seen this season is him finishing below. And although at times the moniker of Tire Whisperer has been used for George, um, I don't know if it is accurate, and I think it's premature. And I will say, I have honestly, hand to heart, sympathies for George Russell. I believe that from now until the end of next year, or probably about a year, George has to fight and prove himself worthy of retaining that seat because, unfortunately for him, Toto Wolff is clearly looking to bring Max Verstappen in. He's about to bring Kimi Antonelli in for Monza. They'll probably announce Kimi at Monza's official replacement for Lewis Hamilton. I heard rumors that they're doing some corny ceremony for transfer of the seat. I really hope they don't. That's gonna be so dumb, so whack. But the point here, I mentioned it before, and if it's your first time listening, the thing that I mentioned before is this: it's clear that Toto doesn't believe George is going to be the future leader of the team. It's clear that Toto doesn't believe that the talent for George is there to a point that he does not need to bring in another driver, right? And so George has to basically audition for his job or audition for another job on the grid, or he is going to be out of a seat in 2026 if Toto Wolff is able to bring Max Verstappen into Mercedes. And until he gets a new contract, never say never. But watch next year, the pressure is going to be on George. And so I do say that I have to feel bad for him. Now, on the final note for George is yeah, continues to qualify really great, but doesn't really show a lot for it. I don't know why Mercedes pitted him and gave up track position, except to say maybe they felt like Checo and Carlos were going to catch up to him and pass him, and they were going to lose position on track anyways, and then he was going to be passed by Lewis, which again, don't really know what the strategy was there, but essentially he gave up two positions and ended up finishing in P7, right? So yeah, I don't know. He was passed on track by both Piastri and Leclerc, and then eventually he was pitted and lost to Sainz and Perez, whatever. Um, so yeah, we'll see. Hopefully George can sort it out. Again, it is trial by fire from now until he gets that new contract, because a lot of people seem to forget that both him and Lewis got a 1+1, and this is 2025 is going to be the +1. If Toto can get the man he wants, which is Max Verstappen, then Russell is out. And I don't know if Red Bull would replace Verstappen with a Russell, or if Red Bull says we're going to get rid of Checo, and now that Verstappen's gone, we're going to bring in a Russell and a junior like a Lawson. I don't know. The makeup of Red Bull is going to be different, and I feel like unless George proves his worth, he's gone. So if real obvious statement coming right now, if Antonelli dunks on George in his first season in F1, it's a wrap for George. All right. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking. It's a wrap for George. So we'll see what happens. On the other side of the garage, you have Lewis Hamilton. What can I say except for obviously I'm disappointed in the qualifying. I know Lewis has it in him. I know the skill is there. I know this car is super finicky, and I know that when the car is good, Lewis is good. So I'm not even gonna discredit that. Um, I wasn't necessarily expecting him to get pole. I was just expecting him to finish higher than P12, right? Um, because had he finished higher than P12, even with the impeding penalty, still would have been in the top 10, and he would have definitely made up those positions, whatever. But the lap was freaky. Maybe the pace wasn't there. Or maybe it was because he got a new barber, and that new barber didn't fade his sideburns into his beard. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to talk about it. Please don't come after me. If you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, just know that I am also a Lewis Hamilton fan. All right. And I love Lewis Hamilton as a driver. I think he's a great role model for everybody on the grid. But that does not excuse Lewis from allowing the barber to not fade his sideburns into his beard. So I'm hoping by the time we get to Monza, that will have been settled and we'll get a nicer fade. That has nothing to do with racing, but his sideburns not being connected to his beard is maybe why he couldn't put a lap together and connect the lap together during qualifying. I don't know. There's something there. But again, the same thing I'm going to say about Lewis is this, that I was saying about Carlos. Where Lewis started, right? He started P14. He made up 6 positions and ended the race in P8. Probably could have finished in P7 had Mercedes not pitted George Russell in front of him, whatever it is, right? And Lewis wasn't going to fight for a P7. Like, that's just not in his nature. He doesn't really care. P7, P8, at that point, you're so far down, it's not really worth fighting for, right? But again, congratulations for doing what he was supposed to be doing. And again, it's not a hater statement. It's the recovery drive statement is no longer applicable because he was behind cars that were slower than him. Again, if you look, he started in P14. In front of him was Danny Rick. Don't rate him. Frankly, I will be surprised if he's there next season. Hulkenberg in the Haas. Sonoda in the RB. Sainz, okay, sure. In the Ferrari. Gasly, okay. Stroll and Alonso, right? So like all of these cars that are not faster than the Mercedes, who at times can be the third or second fastest car, and for most of the season has been the fourth fastest car, right? So Lewis did what he was supposed to do, and frankly, I congratulate for him for doing that. I don't know what to expect from Monza. It's supposed to be super hot this weekend, and so uh, yeah, I don't know. Mercedes W15 does not do well in the heat. So I am hoping, beyond all hope, the Lulu is the Salulu. All right. That maybe he pulls off 106 at Monza, but I'm also not going to hold my breath. And I think that's okay, only because of how hot it is and how finicky that car is. Now, watch him put that car on pole, watch him win. And I would gladly, by the way, eat my words if that happens. All right. I can be wrong about that for sure. But we'll see. In any case, like, Lewis had a great race. I will say a little bit of a criticism to Bono on this race for he was definitely better as a race engineer than he has been in times past. But the one knock on him obviously is not giving Lewis the information that he needed, specifically about the fastest lap, or not telling Lewis, hey, in order for you to catch up to Checo, you need to hit this. Or at least he did eventually, right? He was telling him, hey, you need to hit the 114s, 113s to be able to catch up to Checo by the end of the race. And he was setting that pace, and then he was not even overtaken. They pitted George Russell in front of him, right? So um whatever. And so my only criticism really is to Bono, and yeah, 9 races left with Bono as his race engineer. It's going to be bittersweet, but who knows? As for the rest of the teams, all right. So you had, um, your Haas's, your RBs, your Aston Martins. The only honorable mention for me is going to go to Pierre Gasly. Gasly had honestly a really good race. He started in P9 and I think he ended the race in P9, but it's a situation where he did what he had to. His teammate did not do anything. I don't know if Ocon cares at this point because he's going to Haas anyways. Jack Doohan is going to be his replacement, so whatever. I think Ocon's just, I'm just here so I don't get fined. He's on that 2 week notice mentality, whatever it is. So yeah, Ocon, whatever. Gasly finished P9. So my honorable mention goes to Alpine out of the midfield teams. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about is Williams. So Williams saw the, I guess we finally saw what we had heard rumors about for a long time. Williams came into this race, brought a ton of upgrades, like new floor. They don't have a ton of money. And during FP3, Logan Sargent does what Logan Sargent does, or did what Logan Sargent does, whatever this does, do. He wrecked his car. All right, it was a ball of flames. Took his eye off the road. Car got into the grass and he crashed it. And James Valls was visibly upset. For the longest time, he had been rumored to be replaced mid-season. Lawson, Schumacher, other people were rumored to replace Sargent, so it was a bit of a surprise for me to see him coming after the break. And again, I have to feel for him because it's crazy to think that Carlos Sainz was announced, so you knew that Sargent wasn't coming back. All season, they've been openly looking for a replacement, so he knew he wasn't going to be coming back. All right, and Vols had set targets. Sargent was not able to meet those targets, whatever it is. But how crazy it must be, and I mentioned it again, to be in a factory with your coworkers, your replacement gets announced, and all your coworkers are cheering. Like, dang. So emotionally, I do have to feel bad for Sargent, but the announcement that was made today, so I'm recording and it's Tuesday. The announcement that was made today was that Sargent was going to be replaced by F2 driver, Williams driver, 6th place in F2, by the way, Franco Colapinto. All right. The decision does not make sense to me. You are replacing Sargent, a driver who was brought up too soon from F2, and replacing him with Colapinto, who is a junior driver coming in, and I'm not sure what they're trying to see because you've already got signed. So unless you're trying to make Colapinto your reserve driver for Williams, I don't really know or understand the move, especially when a Schumacher was available, especially when a Lawson was available. And I know that Lawson, probably Red Bull, did not want to give Lawson or loan Lawson out to Williams, considering that Williams is competing with RB. And so, they didn't want to help a competitor out, right? Whatever it is, we say adios to the Logan Sargent era, and we say bienvenido to the 9 race Franco Colapinto era. Congratulations to that young man for making it. He will be racing as number 43 for Williams, and his first FP1 of the season, or not of the season, but his first FP1 will be this weekend at Monza. So we will see how that pans out. So yeah, the final thing for me is our Matatans and our Pariguayo. So my Pariguayo of the race this season, or this race, is going to be Paraguayo is going to go to Checo. Yeah, and you know what? The only reason I'm giving Paraguayo or worst performance to Checo is because I'm still salty about the move he pulled during qualifying. So as I've always said, these F1 drivers are a bunch of feds, they're a bunch of federales, they're a bunch of narcs. So I'm strictly giving Checo Paraguayo a worst performance based on the fact that he was basically campaigning for a penalty on Lewis Hamilton. The penalty was ridiculous. I don't care. The penalty was ridiculous. All right. And my Matatana of the race goes to Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc is my driver of the day, best performance of the race, well deserved, and he did good to secure that podium for Ferrari. So that's it. It was Zandvoort. It was a race, and we are on to Monza, and then it's going to be a month-long break again before we get to Singapore. And so with that, if you're watching for the first time or if you're watching regularly, please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. Tell your mommies, your papis, your tíos, your tías, abuelos, abuelas for the Monoplaza F1 podcast. This is Emi Bertre. Peace.